From Atlanta, Georgia, welcome to Fearfully and Wonderfully Me, a podcast for women on leadership and life skills with Ria Story. Ria shares powerful life and leadership principles, helping you maximize your potential and become the woman God created you to be.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Fearfully and Wonderfully Me, a podcast designed to empower women to become the leaders they are destined to be. Super excited about today's episode. This is a sequel to the episode we did last week where I've got my special guest, my husband here, and we're talking about leadership in relationships. So welcome back, Mack.
Hey, I'm glad to be back, Ria.
Excited about these principles and how, always excited to talk about how they apply, because a lot of times we think about leadership applying in our professional life, and that's absolutely true, but leadership principles, as we're talking about them today, also apply in our personal relationships, and perhaps even more so with the people that we love and care about and spend a lot of time with. So it's always exciting to me to talk about it from this perspective. And I know a lot of people just need some awareness and some insight of how powerful these principles can improve a relationship. I know you and I have both experienced that in different ways over the years.
Yep, it's good stuff. And hopefully everyone enjoyed the first episode. And we're back for more. We're going to dig into some trust building principles today, right?
Yeah, so we finished up last week's episode talking about, starting a relationship and identifying our values that are important to us in relationships. And then we talked a little bit about the love languages. And so now I think let's dig into a little bit more about what we call deposits into the trust account.
Yeah, so when it comes to our personal relationships especially, we've got to be intentional about building trust. That's in any relationship, because no one has to follow you. Your significant other, your spouse, boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever it may be, they don't have to come back around tomorrow if they don't want to. They can move right on out the door. So when we talk about trust, there's two components of trust. I can't make you trust me. I have to be trustworthy. And the two components of trust are character and competency. We touched on that a little bit last time, but it's the big piece. And when it comes to a personal relationship, it's really not very much about competency. It's all about the character side. And the two components underneath character is our intent and our integrity. And intent, when I teach about it and write about it in my books, I talk about intent is the foundation of trust. Trust is the foundation of influence, authentic influence, but intent is the foundation of trust. And what I mean there, and you can relate to this, if whoever you're in a relationship with, they're either trying to motivate you or manipulate you. And if someone's trying to manipulate you, I promise you, if you meet someone, you may think you're attracted to this person. Maybe you've never talked to them. You've seen them around or whatever. But the moment you start talking to them, if you start to feel manipulated, you're never going to get to the point where this person's going to have a platform to build trust, because you're never going to trust them if you feel manipulated. Why do they want to be in the relationship with you? They want something personally from you. Maybe you got money or a nice home or whatever it is. If you feel they're trying to manipulate you, get you into that relationship, that's one of those big red flags, and you usually don't need any help with that if it's early on. If it's early on, most of the time people will move away from people trying to manipulate them. But if there's some time passed, a lot of times those bad folks out there, they'll play nice on the front end, and then they start to slowly manipulate over time, and that's where it gets pretty painful. But the whole key is to build trust.
Yeah, so one of the big ways that we make deposits into our emotional trust account or our relationship account, and you and I talk a lot, we use the analogy of a relationship with someone is much like our bank account. right? We have to be intentional about putting deposits into an account because there are going to be some withdrawals. And just like your bank account, if you don't put enough deposits into that relationship to cover the withdrawals, you end up overdrawn. And when that happens in a relationship, there is no trust. The trust is destroyed. So you and I teach about that a little bit and talk about how can we be intentional about making deposits into that relationship with our spouse or significant other.
Yeah, we touched on this a little bit last time, but one of the big things to do is look for little things to do. Just like earlier this week, I took your car here in Georgia. We have to get an annual inspection on the car to be able to renew our tags, and so I took my car, and then I brought it home, and I took your car. First of all, I guess that was one way to do it. Is I was making a deposit. You didn't have to go do it, but I didn't even think about you going to do it. But the thing is, while I had it out, I noticed you needed some gas, and so I took it up and filled it up for you and washed the windshield and that sort of stuff. But that's making deposits. The key is you don't make deposits so you can take a withdrawal. If you do, that's manipulation. You make deposits because it's the right thing to do. And then if you make withdrawals, then hopefully they're going to be accidental withdrawals, but we all make accidental withdrawals constantly. That's why we need to have some trust in the bank, so to speak, because we're going to do accidental withdrawals. Somebody's going to do something, you're not going to say thank you, or you're not going to show appreciation enough, or that sort of stuff. And accidental withdrawals are happening all day long.
Yeah, and we don't mean them. That's why we call them accidental. But sure, sometimes we're just focused on ourselves and we forget to say thank you, or maybe we just are having a bad day or a stressful day, and it's not intentional, but we lose our temper or choose the wrong response, or maybe we just get mad or frustrated. And sometimes the person closest to us is the one that we take our frustrations out on. And so those little withdrawals do happen, and so we do have to be intentional about putting deposits in. But I love what you said about we have to make the deposit into the relationship account because it's the right thing to do, not because we're trying to get something from the other person. And I like to think that if we're intentional about putting deposits into the relationship first, it's much easier for the other person to feel like they can reciprocate. Is that the way how you feel?
Yep, but again, you don't do it for that reason, right? You just do it because it's the right thing to do. But because you're doing nice things for people, if you want to call it, refer back to the love language, right? That's building trust. Those 5 love languages we talked about a little bit in the last episode. If you're talking to your significant other in their language, you're building trust. If you're staying away from the ones they don't like, you're building trust. But if I like gifts, or I don't like gifts, so let's say I don't like gifts, and you don't like them either, Ria, but in this example, let's say you love getting gifts, but you don't. But let's say you did, and I still don't. And because we see the world as we are instead of how it actually is, a lot of times someone like Ria in this scenario, someone who loves gifts, thinks everybody else loves gifts. So if she was trying to communicate to me in her love language and giving me gifts, I hate gifts. Every time she gives me one, it would be annoying me. And if she truly thought she was doing a good thing, that would be an accidental withdrawal. She may not know about the love languages. So she's just trying to she sees it how she is. That's why this stuff's so important. Learning about leadership and learning how to apply these principles in your own life personally.
Let me just go ahead.
Just because there's so many ways we can make withdrawals, accidental withdrawals into the trust account of other people, and we don't even know it, but it's because we don't know what we don't know. That's why you and I read every day.
Yeah, absolutely. And let me just clarify, it's not that I dislike gifts, it's just not my primary love language. So I just wanted to clarify that, because I think you definitely have an aversion to being the center of attention and unwrapping a gift and receiving a gift. So just because a love language isn't someone's primary love language doesn't mean it's a bad thing necessarily. Again, here.
Yeah, you don't hate them. You don't hate gifts like I do. You just don't prefer them. I go where the gold is at. And the gold for you is in words of affirmation, physical touch. And I get you stuff, though, sometimes. I get you gifts and things. But it's not like I'm just trying to load you up with them, because that's not what you're looking for.
Yeah. So, I think that's a really important point you make, though, that we do have to be intentional about that. So let's talk about strengthening a relationship, because we talked about starting relationships, and then we talked about shaping the relationship with our deposits and withdrawals and overcoming that. But talk about strengthening a relationship long term. What are some key things that you feel like are very important to be intentionally, as you and I talked about, intentionally growing together over the years? Because you and I live and work and travel together all the time. Like, we spend a lot of time together. What's important to you, or what do you think is important in helping keeping that relationship strong?
Well, one of the most important things is understanding your mission and helping you with your mission, and you do the same thing for me. I mean, and that actually comes down to the other thing is really looking for the win. Both of us win. I mean, that's a key, because we've learned so much about all this stuff, and we actually do live it, we do apply it. It's almost too easy because it's like I'm your biggest cheerleader, you're my biggest cheerleader. I support you in doing whatever you want to do, and I would do that completely, and my stuff could sit to the side, and you're the same way. You can set your stuff to the side and support me. Like, I just finished my new book, Blue Collar Leadership and Culture, and I told Ria I was going to start writing that book, and within a day or so I had a cover. I mean, the cover was done. Ria does the covers for me. She loves doing that, and she does it for herself and for me. But the key is to understand what the other person's expectations are. And when you talk about personal relationships, I mean, that principle right there, seek first to understand, then be understood. I learned it from Dr. Covey in the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, habit 5. But that one principle alone was what allowed me to rebuild the relationship with Eric, my son, for the folks who are listening. He's 28 today, but between 15 and 19, we didn't have a relationship. I discovered what we're talking to you about when he was 17, so he hadn't talked to me really for 2 years. And then I discovered the 7 Habits, and then I started reading them and teaching them and learning other books and other content. 2 years after that, doing that every day, 2 years later, because my mom had shared with him that Dad's changing. That's what Mom would tell him all the time. Your dad's changing. You need to give him another chance. Dad's changing. And he finally gave me another chance, which was 4 years from the start. 2 years into my growth journey into this leadership development and personal growth. But what I got right that day, I remember I was in Texas after consulting all day. It was in the evening. And I remember he called me that night, and he talked for 2 hours. He hadn't talked to me for 2 hours probably the last 4 years. But it was because I got this principle right. But anytime there's conflict in a relationship, whether it's at work or at home, but we're talking about at home, and it doesn't matter with which family member or friend or whatever, whenever there's conflict, if you can have the discipline to say, I'm going to understand you first, the other person. Because I ain't worried about being heard. I just want to understand you. So if I'll say, my whole mission is to understand you, and you decide when you understand me. I don't decide, you decide. So until you feel understood and can communicate that to me, apparently I don't understand yet. That's okay. I got to be willing to keep working through this until you feel like I understand. And then I can talk, because when the other person feels understood, well, now they're open to what you have to say, because you're saying it based on a full understanding of what they had to say. But if they think you don't understand when you start talking, they think you're giving them some information with the wrong foundation. But when you understand, they know you got the right foundation, so now they're interested in hearing what you have to say. So it's just a simple principle. If there's conflict at work, that's what somebody needs to do, is seek first to understand. It doesn't matter if you're the team member or the boss. Either one of you can do it. Whichever one of you will do it is actually the one who's being the leader. Same way at home. The teenager can do it to the parent. The parent can do it to the teenager. It doesn't matter. Whichever one has the character and the integrity and the discipline to do it, that person is leading at that moment. And all they're doing is listening.
It is. I mean, it sounds very simple, but and it is powerful. So, in an example, when you're getting in an argument, what would it look like? What would seek first to understand look like?
When I'm getting into an argument?
Yeah. What would it look like if we apply this principle?
So it would look like pausing. It would be like, gather yourself together before you get wound up and say, you can say it out loud, but first say it to yourself. Maybe I'm misunderstanding something. And take the blame. Go look in the mirror and take the blame for whatever's going wrong and say, whatever's going wrong, somehow it's my fault. And I don't even know it, but I'm going to say it's my fault, whatever that means. And I'm going to pause, and I'm going to try to make sure the other person feels understood. If both of you understand all this stuff, you can say that's what I'm doing. I'm just trying to understand. If not, you still can say I'm just trying to understand, but then you have to literally try to understand. And when you're saying that, you got to make it clear. I'm not saying I disagree or agree. Even when you think I understand, I'm not saying I agree or disagree. I'm 100% purely trying to understand. And you decide when I understand. And then we can talk about agreeing and disagreeing. But that's if either person would do that, the argument usually would end, because now one person quit arguing, so now they're trying to understand. So the other person nobody's arguing anymore.
Yeah,
and it's not like.
Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, a lot of times, though, when people are arguing, the whole point is both of them are trying to be understood. And they get louder and louder and madder and madder. Nobody's understanding. So it's like the whole thing is useless anyway. It's crazy how we are.
Yeah, we're emotional feelings. And unfortunately, our emotions don't have logic. They're not logical. They're not intellectual. They don't think. Our emotions are just feelings. And that doesn't always serve us, especially in relationships with significant other or our kids, because there's a lot of emotion around those relationships because we care. We love that person. And you're right. I think a lot of times we get frustrated because we don't feel like the other person understands us. And so we beat our heads against the wall trying to feel understood. And they're on the other side of the wall beating their heads against the wall. And until we can stop and look through the window and say, let me look at your perspective. Let me look through the window of this wall and see what's on the other side. Oh, now I see what you're seeing. Doesn't mean I agree with it. I'm not standing on the other side of the wall necessarily, but I can see that from your perspective. And it's so powerful when we can do that, because the other person feels validated. Like you said,
Yep.
Not necessarily that I agree, but they feel like you can empathize.
Yeah, it gives them psychological air, room to breathe. And the whole point is, when we're being reactive or aggressive or mad or angry or all that kind of stuff, it's because we're responding to whatever's going on based on our feelings, our emotions. But to really lead yourself well, to be able to slow down, catch your breath, say, I'm going to seek first to understand, that type of thing, you got to ask yourself, what do I value? And then if the relationship, if you value the relationship, what would you actually do if you did value the relationship? Because you've got to think, I'm trying to build trust with this person. Does yelling, screaming, some people get physical. That's like the worst end of it. But all of that stuff, that's not building trust with anybody. And I mean, you and I hardly have any even little things. Our life's pretty good. And a lot of it is because we live this stuff and we both know it. Instead of just one of us knowing it, or one of us playing around in it a little bit, we live it and we both know it. And it's made life really nice compared to what we see out in the world and hear other people moaning, groaning, and complaining and all that kind of stuff that people do. There's a lot of miserable people out there.
Yeah,
doesn't have to be that way.
I think what you said is important. We do both work at it, and that's a big piece of it. Not that we get it right all the time. I mean, there's still times when I know
I get it wrong every day.
And so, nobody's perfect. It's not about that we just suddenly magically become nice people all the time. It's just that we are both proactive in valuing the relationship and trying to work through any issues that do come up. And it's valuing the relationship more than the activity we're doing at the moment. Like when you say, where do you want to go out to eat? And I'm like, it really doesn't matter to me because I value you and the relationship. So wherever you really want to go out to eat is not that big a deal.
Talk about right quick how you do the number, because that's cool. I don't know if that's part of this lesson, but it'll fit in right there. It's pretty neat. It makes our decision making a whole lot easier when we do this. Either way,
it does. And I think I heard this somewhere, and maybe it was in Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective Marriages, but I'm not quite sure where I heard it. But I heard it years ago, and so. When Mack and I are talking about doing something, going out to eat, for example, and Mack and I get in the car, we're driving down the road, and Mack says, where do you want to go out to eat? And he says, you want Mexican? And I say, well, today I really just am not in the mood for Mexican. I'm a 2. On a scale of 1 to 10, I'm a 2 when it comes to Mexican. Or maybe it's, he says, would you rather have Mexican or Chinese food? And I say, man, I'm a 5 on a scale of 1 to 5. Either place would be just as good for me. And so it gives us really an objective way to just say, hey, I'm not feeling Mexican, I'm a 2, let's choose something else. Or, hey, it doesn't really matter either way, you choose, because it's not a big deal for me. So I think that number just gives us an objective way to rate where we are, and what we have an opinion on doing.
Makes it easy. When you say 5, that means I'm picking.
Yeah, and it just means, hey, you pick, and I'm not going to get mad when you pick because I've given you permission. I've just said, hey, I'm a 5. I don't care. But if I have a strong, go ahead.
You do it also when I ask, do you want to go out to eat at all?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's the one I like the best. Is where you at on this? Do you want to go out? Well, I'm a 5, which means you don't care either way. If you're an 8, that means you want to go out. So let's go. If you're a 2, you don't want to go out. And if I'm wanting to build trust, I don't want to go out either. I'm staying home, and it's going to be fine.
Yeah, I think we talked about this, and we use this a lot. We talked about where to go for a weekend getaway, like beach or the mountains. Well, I'm a 5 for the beach, or I'm an 8 for the mountains. It just really gives you a good way to quantify that so the other person can know the temperature. Know that we don't play a lot of games. The better and more effectively we can communicate with one another, the less problems that we have to begin with to deal with.
You know what, Ria? I want to talk about, you're talking about the beach or the mountains. Let's say I'm a 10 for the beach, you're a 10 for the mountains. People say, what do you do then? You go somewhere there's mountains and beach. That's the perfect scenario. You go to California, you go out on the coast where there's a beach and there's mountains right there beside it, or somewhere else in the world. Doesn't matter where, if you got the money, but that's a different issue. That's what you're looking for when two people want two different things. I had a guy one time ask me in a session we were speaking on, and he said, I just can't understand this win-win. How does that work? And he said, what if I want to paint the wall red and you want it black? I said, well, if I want it black and you want it red. He said, yep. I said, you do not want to change it? He said, nope, I want it red. I said, it'll just be red then. He said, well, how's that a win? I said, because I value the relationship more than I value the wall being black. So it's super easy. Paint the wall red. Yeah, I wanted it black, but our relationship's not ruptured.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's really powerful when you put it like that. It's just saying, in a perfect world, we wouldn't have to respond based on our emotions and feelings of the moment. But anytime we can pause and step back and say, you know what, I value this relationship, and the color of the wall is not as big a deal as this relationship long term. And when you put it like that, most of the things we argue about or fuss about just really aren't a big deal.
It's crazy, Ria, what people argue about. You turn on the news and see what people kill each other over. It's ridiculous. This stuff doesn't even matter.
Yeah. I have a quote that I wanted to share as we wrap up. Michael Ciartino, from his book, Gratitude Marketing, and he says, relationship capital isn't an asset, it's a privilege. And I love that, because when we think about that, relationship capital isn't an asset, it's a privilege. So if we all went into our relationships thinking that our capital in that relationship is a privilege, it's something that we earned. The trust is something that we build. And the more intentional we can be about building that and keeping that and preserving it, the easier it becomes to overcome the withdrawals and the little things that happen, little bumps in the road.
I agree.
True relationship test, whitewater rafting. We don't have time to tell that story really in depth today, but share for just a minute how our experience whitewater rafting really shown or really pointed out the different ways that you and I communicate.
Well, you kind of go silent, and I kind of go violent. That's one way. What that means is you're quieter and I'm louder. It doesn't mean literal violence, but some of the books we read, they talk about silence and violence, but that's I get more reactive, and you get more quiet, and I don't know what you're looking for out of that story, so you got to help me. I mean, we ain't got but a couple of minutes, but we need to do a video on that and tell that story.
We could do that. We tend to, anytime there's conflict, I tend to get quieter and more reserved and withdrawn, and you tend to get more vocal, and that creates a little bit of a clash too, because you want to talk things out and I just want to think about it. And so there again, being aware of what
Let's do a part 3, Ria, and let's just do the rafting story. I don't know how long it'll be. It won't matter if it's 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes. Let's do a part 3 and on this audio, because we kind of baited them up now. They're wondering. So let's do a part 3 and do it like we do when we're on stage, because we tell this all over the country from the stage, and it's a little more funny when you can see it in person, but it's still full of lessons, and I think you'll get some out of it even on audio. Let's do that, Ria.
All right, we'll do a part 3 then. Until next time.
Start increasing your influence and maximizing your potential with Ria's audiobooks. Available at audible.com, amazon.com, and iBooks. Please visit riastory.com to learn about Ria's books, resources, speaking, and training programs. Thanks for listening.